I do think at its best, test knitting can create community, can offer this kind of like not financial or like less capitalist, I don't know, like this bartering system, things that we have said we want to see in the knitting world. I do think that it can be that when it is not exploitative or creating, negative, alienated feelings that are objectively true rather than just perceived.
Yeah, I'm still never going to do one, though.
I see deep brick red, slick cherry red, shiny rosy red, candy apple red, Estella deep red on your face, 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 face.
Hello, and welcome to Two Women Yelling About Knitting, a show that's not about what we're buying or what we're making, but instead asks questions like, has test knitting culture gone too far? This is a space where we look up from our works in progress and acquisitions and talk about what we see in the wider world of knitting, its political, social, and historical context. But don't worry, it'll be fun. I'm Anjali, and I'm a knitter living in Denver, Colorado.
I'm Alison, and I'm a knitter living outside of Washington, D.C. We're friends who share a love of knitting, as well as an interest in a lot of sticky topics that relate to knitting, things like politics, mental health, intellectual property, and more. We're recording another 6-episode season with a new episode and a new topic every 3 weeks. If you want to join us on this journey, hit the subscribe button to follow along.
So, Alison, what are we yelling about today?
Today, we are yelling about test knitting. What is test knitting? What is some of the chatter we've been observing about it recently? What are kind of like the underlying factors that have led to this chatter? Things like the value of labor, the ways we build community, the support or not support systems that we see in test knitting culture.
Great. So our opening question is, have you ever test knit?
I have. I've test knit a number of times. So I've done 4 official test knits, and I've also done what was called preview knitting for Brooklyn Tweed, which is different from official test knitting. I have also applied to a number of other test knitters. The ones I did do, the official test knits I did were for not as big designers, I'd say, and I've applied to a few test knits from bigger designers and have not been chosen. So
Maybe you will now that you're a knitfluencer.
All the knitfluencing I'm doing. Well, but actually, interestingly, and we'll talk about this, we'll get a little more into my experience with these test knits later. But the last test knit I did, it wasn't like terrible, but I for the first time, didn't love the final product and was like, no, that was not worth my time. And so I haven't done one since. So I don't know that I will be doing any more in the future. We'll see. How about you, Anjali?
I have never done a test knit, and I probably never will. Just sometimes I'll click on the link to apply, and I just start to feel like this feels like my knitting will feel like homework, and I'll have a deadline, and I'll feel pressure, and that's just not the vibe I want with my knitting at all. And then I end up abandoning, not applying. So, yeah.
Fair enough. And I think that that's part of why I'm so excited to talk about this today is when we have differing opinions or pretty vastly differing experiences. It's just always very interesting to me. And I'm glad that we can kind of offer both perspectives so that people watching can kind of hear their own thoughts or see someone that they feel like reflected in terms of their attitude towards this question. So before we get into our thoughts on test knitting, our experiences, some thoughts that people have shared with us, we put out a call on Instagram, grateful for those insights. We want to just explain a little bit about what test knitting is. So we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about today. So Anjali, what is test knitting?
So it's basically testing a pattern before it's published to make sure that it works for a variety of people, that it makes sense. So test knitters would get a copy of the pattern before it's released and given some time to actually make the pattern in their size. And in return, they give feedback on the clarity of the pattern, if there's anything that's confusing, maybe possible mistakes in the numbers as far as like number of stitches for various parts of the pattern, the fits, if it doesn't work on all bodies. Nowadays, now that a lot of patterns are online and on Ravelry, it also allows designers to get photos of their finished items on different types of bodies, and also people can put their project onto Ravelry and give the pattern a review and have finished projects there, so that when the pattern is released, when people go to look at it, it's not just a total trust exercise, that they're seeing how this pattern looks on various types of people and reading some feedback on what the process of knitting the pattern was like. It also, these days, can build hype for patterns on social media. People get really excited about certain patterns, getting to test knit them and then showing their progress online can really get a lot of buzz around a pattern before it's released. And then the more popular a pattern is when it's released, the more clicks that it gets. Ravelry doesn't have exactly like an algorithm, but the more it'll show up in people's feeds as like a popular pattern, and then the more sales that could result from that.
Yeah, and it's different from tech editing. So tech editing is usually a step that happens before test knitting, in which the designer works with a tech editor as like a true formal editing experience. For sometimes it involves gradings. A designer may have made a pattern that works in this one size, and then the designer works with the tech editor to make sure that the pattern can be made both bigger and smaller. Also, the tech editor does things like check the math. So usually that is a step that has already happened if someone's working with a tech editor. The test knitter, however, and we did receive feedback from a designer who said that they still sometimes, despite the most intense tech editing, an error can slip through. And so sometimes there is that additional level of test knitters giving feedback on, oh, actually, there's a mistake in the math here. But you're not being expected to, in a true test knit, it's not like, hey, can you help me figure out how to make this sweater fit your size body? It should already be done. And you're simply there to say, maybe this number is a little bit off, or, that the way that this direction moved into this direction was confusing to me and I wasn't sure what to do. You might want to provide more clarity. So it is a different thing from tech editing. It should be, at least. Test knitters also get to keep the item that they made. So there's also something called sample knitting, where you might knit an item and then send it to the designer. And that is not what is happening with test knitting. In all cases I've ever heard of, test knitters get to keep what they make. Test knitting calls go out in a number of different places. So Ravelry forums is a place where designers will put out calls for test knitters. There's also a dedicated platform called Yarn Pond, which is purely for the purpose of finding test knitters, which is kind of cool. Instagram, also a great place to find test knitters. Hashtag test knitters wanted is very common. And then more and more, I see designers going to their email listservs to find test knitters. Running a test knit can be a very involved process. And I think that a lot of designers are finding it more manageable to go through their listservs to people that are already kind of engaged with them in a more active way. So I think I was thinking about it. I found one of my test knits, I believe, on Ravelry. I was on Yarn Pond for a while. I don't think I ever did anything off of it, but I looked at it often. And then the others, I think I found all through Instagram. Although I think some of the ones I applied for and didn't get were through email listservs. So all of the modalities are different ways that test knitters find out about possible test knits. And then the sign up process tends to be through commenting on the Instagram post. Like, yeah, I'm interested and this is the size I might want to make. Sometimes they're more involved. Sometimes there's a Google form where it's like, okay, well, here is the size I'm willing to make. Here is my level of knitting experience, which I think is really interesting. That's something I've seen a lot more recently, which is not that you have to be super experienced to do a test knit. It's that designers want to have a range of experience levels, because having people at a range of levels allows to make sure that the pattern is accessible to more different knitters. So the size I want to make, my experience with knitting, can I commit to this deadline? Am I willing to, do I have a public Instagram account that I'm willing to share my photos with or not. Here's the yarn I'm thinking about using. Kind of all these different questions can often be part of the application process.
And what are some of the, once you're in the test knit, what are some of the parameters that are put on it? Like, what are some of the things that you can and cannot decide for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So usually, when you put in this application, you're kind of locking yourself in to some of these things because the idea of the test knit is to have this range in a number of different ways. And so, for example, if I say I'm going to knit this size and then I'm selected for the test knit, usually that's the size that you're expected to make. The time frame is also a commitment. Interestingly, the yarn that you're using, I think when test knitting started, it was a little more prescriptive. Like it was like, you have to use this yarn. And I haven't seen that. I started test knitting only in the last couple of years, and it's been around for a little bit longer. I see that less and less these days, and I actually think designers are making an effort to do more of a yarn range, in part to make it more accessible because of price point. So it's like, if everybody's knitting it in this super fancy yarn, it's going to look a certain way. It's going to be a certain price point. What if I wanted to see it in a less expensive yarn? What if I wanted to see it in a different fiber content, different color, things like that?
One thing that I'm thinking about is that I often will use a different yarn from what the pattern calls for, but then many times that means when I do a swatch, if I swatch and I like the feel of the fabric, but it's a different gauge, then I will choose the size that makes the right size for me. And so that would be tricky if I guess if I had committed to doing a certain size for a test knit, I guess I would just have to find a different yarn, right? I wouldn't be able to be like, okay, well, now I'm going to do the 4th size.
Yes. So, which leads into this question of, or the parameter of modifications, which I think is a really big one when it comes to test knits. So, right, when you buy a pattern, you can do whatever the heck you want with it. But when you're doing a test knit, and part of the idea is to say, does this pattern work the way it's written? Let me have some samples of what it looks like the way I as the designer intended it to look. That can really lead to different approaches to modifications and how people feel about modifications. So we actually heard from someone on Instagram who said that they've done 11 test knits, and that the modification piece of it, that they found that after having done the first couple that they did, they gave them away because they didn't like how they fit. They said that they tend to knit the smallest size, and just because of their size, the grading doesn't always work for them, and they know how to modify to make it work for them. They know, how to modify for themselves, but that they weren't doing that on test knits. And so this person now chooses test knits specifically with the knowledge that there will be modifications allowed. And I can say when I did the cardigan test knit it didn't have pockets, and I asked if I could do pockets, and the answer was yes. So, a well-run test knit will usually have a way to communicate what you may want or need in terms of modifications, but there is this expectation of asking rather than just doing. That then feeds into the homework piece of it that is not appealing to you.
No, I don't want permission from anyone.
Yeah,
as I've discussed.
Yes.
I am Lord and leader of my knitting.
So that, I think, is something that can turn people off from test knitting. It is kind of the expectation of why you're there as the test knitter is to make it a certain way. And so if you're going to make it differently, you need to ask. Often designers will want to know if you are okay with them using photos that you've taken. I will say, I don't think my face has ever been in a test knit photo. I just didn't, I don't know, the internet. I didn't want to do that. And that was always okay. But they did say, can we use the photos that you've taken? You may be required to put it on Ravelry and or Instagram. You may have to have a public Instagram page. I usually find the Instagram thing to be flexible, but the Ravelry thing is not. It's like, if you're going to make it just in the abstract in your own home and enjoy it and give me feedback, I think that is not as common. The way a test knit is run can also vary greatly from test knit to test knit. Sometimes it's like, I've done test knits where it's like I get emailed the pattern directly from the designer. I can communicate with that designer via email and ask questions, and that's it. And then I've also done it like on Slack, where there's a whole channel dedicated to all the people doing the test knit, and it becomes more of a conversation. Sometimes Sometimes it's done through Google Suite, like the patterns on Google, and you can comment and you can see other people commenting, or in the Ravelry forums, you see people posting, their samples, et cetera, et cetera. I've also heard of Discord being used, which I haven't used, but it is possible. And the way that communication is set up can lead to very different ways that the group of test knitters as a whole functions, which is a piece, I think, of why people test knit, and certainly can be a benefit of it in terms of community that it creates.
And one thing that they don't get out of it usually is, or almost always, is any kind of financial compensation. So, for the most part, the patterns are free, and sometimes there's a yarn discount offered. I have also seen, if it's a test knit, that's, like if the designer has some sort of relationship with a yarn company and this pattern is kind of being used to promote that yarn. I have also sometimes seen that yarn can be provided. And sometimes they are offering another pattern from the designer's collection for free. So that's like a $5 to $10 value that you're getting. So the test knitters themselves are typically putting more financial and time investment into the pattern than they are getting out of it.
Right. Yeah, I will say when I did the preview knits for Brooklyn Tweed, they offered a hefty discount on their sadly discontinued yarn. And what I loved about that discount in particular was you got even more discount if you were using the yarn for the preview knit, but even if you weren't, you still got a very nice discount on any amount of yarn you wanted for the time you put in that you could just use for another project, which felt like a really great, like, kind of like trade system, which I really liked, and which is, I think, when it works well, doesn't feel exploitative.
So was test knitting, I know that test knitting wasn't always like this, because I know that social media and Ravelry have changed things. So what is the history of test knitting?
Yeah, so I couldn't find much on this, but I think it's because it is such a recent thing. I tried to dig into like pre-internet test knitting and couldn't really find a lot of information. So we'd be very curious to hear from viewers, especially those of you who have been knitting for many decades. What was test knitting like in the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s? Obviously books were being published, Vogue Knitting, there are magazines, there are plenty of opportunities to need patterns to be tested, but was it all done in-house? Like, how did that work? Curious. I will say the current test knitting culture that we're in is very much related to the online nature of the knitting world. Ravelry, the rise of self-publishing episode we did in season 1 about, so many designers on Ravelry who are not doing this as their primary income stream, but just kind of putting out a pattern here or there and still wanting it to be accessible and well tested. So just the explosion of patterns, the explosion of self-publishing, leading to more of this DIY, less formally structured test knitting culture. Yarn Pond, which I mentioned earlier, was started in 2018, which to me is an indicator of like, oh, there was a need to have a space for test knitting calls. So, but that is still very recent. I will say something that is consistent is that people do have very strong opinions about test knitting. The algorithm would have us believe that people love it or hate it. There are certainly people who love it or hate it. I think both of us would argue that it is not a black and white issue, and that often, right, we hear mostly the really negative things, and there are certainly like test knitting horror stories out there, but that is not indicative of test knitting culture as a whole. That being said, what are some of the issues, both from knitters and designers' points of view, that are making the test knitting chatter, internet chatter, a bit contentious, shall we say?
There's a lot out there from test knitters' perspectives of things that they wish were different about test knitting process or bad experiences that they've had. But we also heard directly from a knitwear designer who frequently runs test knits and also had some thoughts to share with us. So we will share their thoughts as well. But one thing that both parties have talked about is that Some designers are giving timing windows that are way too short. So this is especially unfair for those who are knitting larger sizes, because if you're knitting a larger size, you are making more fabric. You need more time to be able to knit that garment. I'm not like deep in the test knitting research world, but I have not seen designers give additional time for those that are making larger sizes. Often it's just the same time window for everyone, regardless of what size you're making. And I saw, just for an example, there are many examples out there. There's a lot of people online that talk about this, but for an example, I will link below to a Reddit post that takes a few examples just from mid-March of this year, where some designers were asking, to finish an entire, I think it was a collar, within 2 weeks. And if you think about the time that it takes, often people are having to order yarn online if you don't have like a well-stocked yarn store near you. So it might take a week just to get the yarn for the item. And then another designer that was asking if someone could finish an entire garment by April 10th, which is less than a month from when this call was put out. And then another designer asking people if they could finish a yoke and a sleeve by April 6th. So 3 weeks to finish that amount of knitting, on top of what we talked about with the swatching and the acquiring of the yarn. This seems like pretty unrealistic and stressful kind of deadline. And the designer that gave us some feedback acknowledged that there are designers that are giving shorter deadlines and maybe exploiting their test knitters a bit because of that type of practice, but is frustrated because those designers, which are pretty, like, it's publicly known what sorts of deadlines they're asking for with their test knitting, but people continue to support their work. So they're not getting any feedback from the knitting audience that this type of behavior is unacceptable. They're not really seeing that being reflected in the reaction to their work or their sales, as far as we know. So another issue that I've seen talked about a lot is just expectations around how much the testers need to post on social media or Ravelry. So I found another post on Reddit that said, one test knit I'm in requires me to post 2 pictures of my knit publicly on Instagram, one as a whip and one as a finished object. And another requires me to post publicly on Instagram a picture of me of the finished object in natural lighting, specifically saying no bathroom selfies. The picture has to be the full body, including my face, even though the pattern is for a knit skirt. So that is not uncommon to see pretty specific asks about how much the test knitters need to document and share the work.
Did the designer, is it made clear in the post whether the designer made that clear up front on the application, or after the fact was like, this is how you have to do it? Do we know?
Let's see. It sounds like that they knew ahead of time. So this person said, I agreed because I would normally promote a pattern and I'm making and like anyway. But they have kind of bad feelings because one of the designers, frankly, has run a bad test knit. So it sounds like that is also where some of the bad feelings are coming from. The designer that gave us some feedback said that for them, the marketing material is nice, but that's not the main point of the test knits. It's really about getting the genuine feedback and being able to show the full range of options for the pattern. For some designers, the marketing is not the beginning and end. It's really about the testing of the pattern that is the most important thing. So from knitting designer perspective, one controversy is the fact that they can get ghosted on by the test knitters. So, they go through this whole process of having an application and choosing all the test knitters based on what they need as far as experience levels and sizes and whatever other parameters they want to make sure to include in this test knit. And then it could be an incredibly frustrating experience, I imagine, to just have those folks ghost them, and now they're missing that information that they were hoping to have for the finished pattern.
The designer who contacted us estimated that it's from what they see, about a 30% ghost rate.
That's high.
Yeah.
So some designers have been publicly frustrated, like not surprisingly, and some have even reacted with proposing things like, if you ghost me, then you will get charged for the pattern that you were provided for free if you don't finish the test knit. That has then caused some people to push back and say that's not fair or that's inappropriate. So it's hard to know. On both sides, it seems like you are investing trust that this other party is going to provide you with the experience that you're looking for and that you need. And if that trust is broken, how do you come back from that? Like what's the proper sort of repentance and repair for that broken relationship?
And that is one of the things that I find particularly interesting, especially in the way that the questions we're interested in on this podcast, is like this trust piece is so outside the capitalist system of like money changing hands, and community isn't just like a feel good, everybody's happy all the time thing. Like community can have these downsides of people letting people down or people exploiting people in different ways. And so that is a really interesting undercurrent to me of this whole question.
Yeah. And I think, like there's no real training out there for knitwear designers on how to not exploit your audience or your test knitters, how to run a test knit that is efficient, gets you the information you need, creates an environment that's supportive of the knitters who are involved. So everyone, to some extent, is just going through trial and error. And to me, what it looks like when I hear about these test knits gone wrong, and especially the ones with shorter deadlines, is it takes a lot of organization and planning for if knitting is, especially if knitting is your income stream, either your sole income stream or your main income stream, to plan ahead and say, I'm going to need 8 to 10 weeks of test knitting in order to properly assess this pattern, which means I'm going to need to start knitting that pattern maybe 1 or 2 seasons before I actually want to release it, which means I need to, and to have that planned out precisely with all of the patterns that you are planning to release. It just takes a lot of work. I know we mention her a lot, but I feel like the Crea Bea documents that really well in her YouTube channel of just how far ahead she has to plan in order to be able to run these test knits with a longer time period for people to be able to fully knit the garment that they're testing for her, especially if you're bringing in all the communication pieces and people contacting you about modifications and the back and forth, plus the like editing that you might have to do as a result. It can just mean a lot of time that you need to plan for correctly. And I think that if you are behind in any way, the time that is going to be cut out of that equation is the time that you are giving to test knitters to actually knit that garment. So I acknowledge like it can be tough, and that doesn't mean that it's okay for designers to give their test knitters just a smaller amount of time to finish those knits. But the designer that we spoke to, said that just calling test knitting, like blanket calling test knitting exploitative, is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, assuming it's a well-run test knit with fair conditions. So there are many designers out there, and we can link to another Reddit post that kind of goes through reviews of people going through various test knits, and there are definitely like a lot of designers that people have very good experiences with who feel that they run really fair and well-organized test knits. Also acknowledging sometimes designers run a test knit. It's not that it's exploitative or unfair, but it's just not what you were expecting. Whether that is you're not actually communicating with the designer directly very much. I think that kind of relates to the parasocial relationship that a lot of us have with the knitwear designers that we love because we watch them on YouTube, we follow them on Instagram. We think maybe that doing a test knit for this designer will lead to more contact or just more of a like real relationship with that designer. But if a designer isn't looking to run a test knit that has that communication and relationship building, that can be disappointing for people. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong or bad about that test knit.
Yeah, what I really liked that the designer who communicated with us said was that to not come from a place of, quote, assuming that knitwear designers are doing something really sinister, right? So whether that means, yes, communicating in a professional way, but not becoming your best friend forever, or whether that means you're not getting chosen to be a test knitter, that's not like a personal attack. It is still a professional space. And maybe there just wasn't for whatever reason, you weren't chosen. But there is this kind of knee-jerk reaction sometimes of like, that's wrong or that's bad, and it's like not necessarily the case.
Yeah. And overall, they shared with us that they just wish people would approach this with a little more nuance, which, yeah.
Which is, I think, what we're trying to do today.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that like two women
Yelling about nuance.
Having nuanced conversations about knitting, which I think is kind of our goal here. Like there is such a range of experience, such a range of possibility, and such, so that it can be so many different things.
Yeah. So who benefits from test knitting? Like, should we keep doing test knitting? Is it a good thing? What do you think, Alison?
Yeah, so the designers, especially the smaller ones, really do benefit from this. Some of the test knits I've done have been for much smaller designers who are not doing this as a main income source, who are doing this truly for the love of it, who want to provide a good product and want to be proud of what they're putting out in the world. And having test knitters helps them do that. And that is part of that community piece. Like in our previous episode, we talked about I think it was the intellectual property one, just the idea of like, this is mine, like this design is mine, this knitting technique is mine, and how it used to be a more communal experience. We helped each other out. And so especially in these circumstances where nobody's getting a lot of financial gain out of this, and it really is about true love of the sport, so to speak, I think that, as a test knitter are providing a really valuable assistance to somebody who also loves knitting. And like that can be a good thing. And the designer certainly benefits from it. Also, knitters definitely benefit from it. Like I will go through patterns on Ravelry before I decide if I want to do a project or not. I look for people who have made my size. I look for people who have used a yarn that I want to use or a color palette that I like. And so seeing different bodies, seeing different colors, seeing different fits and sizing, and hearing from people who've made patterns benefits the people who are then going to buy that pattern and make it themselves. So I think those two groups of people certainly benefit from test knitting.
Yeah, and you might wonder, like, after all the controversies we've laid out, like, why would someone test knit in the first place?
Yeah, do the test knitters benefit?
Yeah. So I do think a lot of people enjoy having more maybe social media visibility from bigger designers, or, having the first posts on Ravelry about these designs, and feeling like maybe you're getting exclusive access to a pattern, that, especially if it's one that a lot of people are talking about or are excited about. So that can feel really special. And it's also a chance to just support designers that you really like, whether you like that they appreciate size inclusivity or you do have that sort of parasocial relationship with them. It gives you a chance to just show your support to them through your knitting. And as Alison pointed out to me earlier, much to my surprise and misunderstanding, some people actually like having a deadline on their knit. Sure.
They like being told what to knit, when to knit it, how to knit it. Sure.
Yeah. So I get that. I mean, I do get that. Like, if you struggle to finish things, then having a deadline and having a little bit of that pressure can help to actually finish. So I can see, especially if it's something that you have struggled with, like maybe, you've always wanted to do a Fair Isle sweater, but it's a little overwhelming and you pick it up and put it down, like perhaps being part of a test knit situation could help you actually finish that.
Which is part of which comes to the next piece, which I think is really important, which is the community piece of it. So we've talked about that community aspect of, I as a test knitter feel like I'm helping out this designer, but there's also like the universe of the test knit itself. You hear about people making friends through test knitting. Our communication on Instagram with Gabriella, they said that they've done 11 test knits and got into it for the community piece. They just moved to a new country. There were COVID lockdowns, and doing test knits was a way to have community. They also said that, acknowledged, quote, "Is it fair of me to expect engagement?" I think both from the designer and from the test knit community, maybe not, but I think many people join test knits for the community aspect. And I certainly have experienced that. So I wouldn't say friend, but acquaintance. We follow each other on Instagram. She lives in South Korea. I've never met her in person, but we both did a cowl test knit, and we'll comment on each other's posts. Or, she is just somebody with whom I wouldn't have ever had a reason to make contact. And I did through this test knit, and that's kind of nice. There's also, as we said, the communication piece with the designers. So depending on how the test knit is run, that community piece of it can be the designer talking to the whole group, can be the one-on-one communication with the designer. And I do think that community piece of it goes a long way to creating these feelings of good versus bad test knit experiences. I've never seen it where you're forced to engage in that community. Sometimes it's like, yes, please post a picture when you're done so we can see it. But the forum to be able to communicate and engage as much as you want gives people who do want that the opportunity to do so. And I think that goes a long way or that is a big piece of why people benefit from test knitting.
Yeah, and I think that goes both ways, where if there is that strong community feeling, then people who aren't chosen for the test knit can feel even more left out. So there's not a lot of transparency often on how people are chosen. As we mentioned, you often will fill out a Google form, or at least the ones that I've explored maybe joining. You fill out a Google form with a lot of information about yourself, and sometimes it can feel like a popularity contest to some extent. The ones that I've seen do ask you for your Ravelry information, your social media handles when you're applying. I'm just not very active on Ravelry, so that's been another barrier for me of just not moving forward and being like, well, if they look at my Ravelry, I've literally never posted a project on there that I've finished, because that just is not a priority for me with the time that I spend on my knitting. So I always figure probably wouldn't get picked anyway. But you do often see, very well-known knitfluencers who are often chosen. And I always think it's funny when people are like, oh, I was so surprised that I got chosen. I'm like, really? You have this audience of tens of thousands of knitters watching you. It makes a lot of sense to me that you would be chosen for this test knit.
Then there are people as you said, Crea Bea, I think is fairly transparent in her vlogs. Do we call them vlogs anymore? Or podcasts? Being like, I had this many applicants for these sizes. And that's why when I try to get a few of each size, proportionally speaking, so many fewer people from those sizes will be chosen. Whereas I still need a person for usually a size on either end of the spectrum from smaller to larger. And so that can be a feature of it. I also see specifically with her, and then, also Andrea Mowry, I think I see this too, people who test knit again and again, the same people you'll see showing up. I kind of get that too. I mean, right? It's again, what this designer said, that it's not coming from a sinister place of excluding people, but hey, I've worked with this test knitter. They have really great insights into what I do. They're on time. Final product that they make is useful to me because of what it shows to other people. And they want to keep doing it. That's a great relationship to have. To bring the same people back is not the same thing as icing other people out, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm thinking again about recipe development, cookbook. I've never done it, but I know people who have been regular recipe testers for cookbooks. And that is a long-term relationship often that is developed between you and that cookbook author.
And I appreciated this level of honesty from the designer who communicated with us. They did address that feeling of do people feel they're being excluded, that it's a popularity contest? If the experience of test knitting or applying for test knit, if that, quote, makes a crafter feel FOMO, I think that it's up to that crafter to reflect on why they might be having that response, rather than just to assume that knitwear designers are doing something really sinister. which brings in that nuance piece, right? It's like, it's so easy on the internet to be like, I wasn't chosen. This is a ad hominem attack. And it's like, actually, I mean, we were talking about this before we started recording, applying for jobs, being an actor, going to auditions. Like, when you don't receive feedback about why you didn't get something and the way that that makes you think and the way your brain interprets that is not necessarily the reality of the situation. And having some awareness of that and some context for that maybe would bring the temperature down a little bit on that piece.
And I think social media definitely does not help that, where now you're seeing it everywhere, you know, like once the testnet begins, now people that you follow are part of the testnet, because a lot of times people with big social media followings will get chosen for the testnet. So then it can feel like everyone is doing this except for me, which is not actually accurate.
Yeah. And I think to me, that's where this idea of like, who benefits? The question is, what is the benefit, right? Is the benefit, I want to build my social media following, so having this big designer repost me will get me more followers? Or is it, I want some friends in the knitting world and I'm going to make community out of this? Is it the like parasocial thing? I will say, this isn't an attack on anybody, but it was wild to me when I went to Ravelry this year to see the level of like fervor.
You said you went to Ravelry this year.
Thank you. It was wild to me to see at Rhinebeck. I had to think about it for a minute. At Rhinebeck this year, the level of fervor around Andrea Mowry. Like it was like it was like Brad Pitt. I'm kind of just aged my Timothy Chalamet, whatever analogy you would like to make. But like it was the level of like Beatlemania it felt like was around her. Like not her fault. Nothing against her. But I do think that is part of it too, this parasocial thing I hadn't really thought that much about. And I think that's so interesting that you brought that up, where it's like, oh my God, like I get to test knit for this person. And that means they're going to be my friend. And then maybe being disappointed that someone else, like they have, I don't know, if I've never done an Andrea Mowry test knit, so it's not her specifically, but a bigger designer who then has someone else running their test knit perhaps.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that's not necessarily what's going on here.
Yeah, Andrea Mowry, for the record, was named multiple times as running like 5 out of 5 excellent test knits in that Reddit thread that I found. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not see that, and I loved when you mentioned that. That to me feels like a great way to, I don't want to say like counter this chatter, but seems like a corrective maybe, if that's the word, a good word for it. But it's like the feedback side of it from the test knitter to the public, as in terms of like, how is this test knit run? How does this designer do things? To have that like Reddit thread of like, here are my experiences and reviews of the test knits themselves and what was expected, what did I expect, what did I actually do, et cetera, seems like a great way to, again, I think my idea is like bringing the temperature down.
Yeah, it's so funny. I like do like public health program management, and it's just like we constantly are asking people that participate, like, what was your experience like? How can we do better? And maybe it would help knitwear designers to just have like three little questions that people answer at the end, like, what did this match your expectations? What could we do differently? Something like that to just help.
And maybe there's some who do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was trying to think.
Maybe.
I was like, have any of the ones I've done that? I don't remember. But yeah, that seems like a great way to be open to that feedback. And I will, part of this too is the power dynamic piece of it feels informative to me, right? So it's like, who is the designer? How much are they getting out of the test knit, and what are they giving back in return, right? Like a designer who makes their full living off of this, like, are the expectations around that person different from the expectations around someone who is doing this as a hobby and wants to test knit? I'm curious what you all think about that. Like, is every designer expected to meet the same standards on their test knits? I do think that there are things that are polite, right? Like if I write an email in life, I expect someone to write me back, which is a separate issue I have. But in terms of like, are you getting some sort of discounted yarn? Are you getting boosted on social media, whatever it is? Like, are the expectations different depending on the circumstances? I will say, like, the 2 of the test knits I did, I felt so appreciated. like, I didn't get anything financial out of it. I do think I got a free pattern from each of them in addition to the one I knit, but just the way they communicated with me felt very appreciative and supported. Like when I had questions, they answered them. When I gave feedback, they didn't get defensive, right? And then there was one that I did, which was for a bigger designer, which didn't, it was still a finely run test knit. It just didn't feel as personal
Mm-hmm.
with the community, neither within the community of the test knitters nor with the designer. And that was actually, and I think that's where I was just kind of like, maybe this isn't for me. And so I don't think it can ever be one experience indicates how all experiences are. So that theme of this podcast, it's not black and white. I do think at its best, test knitting can create community, can offer this kind of like not financial or like less capitalist, I don't know, like this bartering system, things that we have said we want to see in the knitting world. I do think that it can be that when it is not exploitative or creating, negative, alienated feelings that are objectively true rather than just perceived.
I'm still never going to do one though.
And still never.
I think for me, it's like the patterns are not that expensive. So it's like, I don't mind waiting and I'll just get the pattern. And sometimes designers give a discount if you subscribe to their newsletter. So I'll just do that.
Get it a little bit cheaper at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't do it because I need the free pattern or want to be famous on social media. It's because when I've done it and it's felt good, it's been like, oh, I'm helping out this smaller designer who maybe can't even afford a tech editor. Which like, I don't know, is this a hot take to be like, not every pattern? Like you pay a tech editor usually. Like there is a lot of upfront, aside from the time and energy you put into making the pattern, a financial investment if you get a tech editor involved. And like, as long as there's transparency around that, like this hasn't been tech edited, I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah, that's the reason I do it or have done it.
So those are our thoughts about test knitting and where things stand now. We're curious to know, what do you think? If you are, especially if you are a designer that has run test knits, if you are someone who has participated in test knits, or even just a bystander like me who has never done a test knit but has
Never
a lot of
have,
thoughts
never
about
will.
them. Yes.
Yeah, please let us know
in the comments.
Yeah, we took a hiatus from this, but I think we're bringing back because we have a little extra time today. See if I say this right. 2 stitches enter, 1 stitch leaves.
Incorrect.
No,
because so we are today going to do a segment of cast on or drop that stitch.
Shoot,
where
right.
I present a knitting related something to Alison, and she will let me know if she is going to take that, if she would take that cast on, or says no way, drop that stitch.
Which I did say it right, but it wasn't the correct segment.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, great.
So today I wanted to present to you, Alison, a few of the kind of like trending patterns or pattern types that I've been seeing around to see if they hold any interest for you. So
okay, great.
If you're going to cast them on or drop that stitch. So the first, and can I share my screen?
I don't know if you can share your screen. You might have to like text it to me. Or you can tell me I'll go into Ravelry. I can just look it up.
Okay, hang on. I can't send you a link.
You could put it in the doc
I
at the bottom.
actually can share my screen. I don't know what it will look like for
in the editing process. All right. We're doing it live.
Yes. Okay, so the first is the Vilma top. Can you see it?
There we go. Oh,
So I feel like it's very popular right now, these tops with, I forget what this type of lace motif is called, like pointelle. So would you cast on or drop that stitch?
I guess drop that stitch because I've seen it. I like it. I wouldn't wear it.
Okay.
That's the issue. It's like, I like it, but it's like, I'm not going to wear that.
Yeah. It's just not your style.
Yeah. I'd be curious what yarn is. Is it wool?
Let's see. It's wool.
It's wool.
So yeah,
Aran weight.
Filcolana, Peruvian Highland wool.
I don't think I would wear it without anything underneath. And this is our perimenopausal lives. It's like I don't think I could wear wool as a tank top. A, B, you maybe could wear it as a vest, and I think you and I are going to need a styling consult later. Maybe we should do like a vest intervention. I don't know. I made a vest for Rhinebeck. I wore it to Rhinebeck because I like made it. I don't like it. It doesn't fit great. I don't know how to style vests, but I want to. So you could wear that as a vest, but I don't feel prepared to do it. So maybe one day, but at this point, drop that stitch.
Okay. All right. Fair. I've seen people wear it as like a vest over a dress. I think that looks cute.
So cute.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't help.
Okay. Yeah.
Vest help.
All right. The next one is these little scarves, like the Uma scarf. So like this, like a kerchief style scarf. This one's by Petite Knit.
Interestingly, okay, so I have that. I did a little test knit for kerchief that I love. I think the rate that it's done at makes it steeper. I don't like the bulk of the tie in this one specifically. The kerchief I do have, however it's constructed, the points are finer, so it ties a little bit better than how I like how this ties. What I actually reach for in terms of like neckwear tends to be closed loops. Like kerchief, like complete, like cowls, basically. Like it's, I'm hard pressed to wear something like that. That being said, I've knit a Sophie scarf. Great gift. Great gift.
I did have a friend request me to knit that, so I will report back when that happens.
My happy about knitting has to do with gift knitting, so I want to actually hear more about your take on that there.
The next one is
I like this
ruffled
structure.
Socks.
Ooh, cast on. I hadn't seen that before. Look at that cute thing. I'm on a sock kick. I had not knit socks for a long time, and now it's the ultimate like portable knitting to me. So why not throw on a little ruffle?
Okay. Yeah. So these are the January socks by Caitlin Bartold. Petite Knit also has some ruffled socks, and I've just been seeing them around the knitverse.
I think they might be fashionable.
They look very cute.
I feel like my 12-year-old.
I think so.
My 12-year-old has some ruffle socks, and that's who knows what is fashionable now. So
yes,
I think they might be in.
I think the kids these days are wearing the ruffled socks, and it's fun for summer, like a nice summer knitting option.
Yes.
Okay. This one is a blast from the past, and I'm curious to know if you would ever knit this incredibly popular pattern that I've been seeing everywhere, which is
Absolutely
the
not.
Mew top. It's giving Forever 21, circa 1999, 2000.
I mean, maybe I should knit this for the said 12-year-old. Like maybe she would enjoy wearing this. I would not wear this.
No.
I don't know that I ever would have worn this.
I feel like I had a top like this, or maybe a few, because I was heavily shopping at Forever 21 circa 1999, 2000. And I just remember when I look at this, I just feel that feeling of like it riding up as I'm moving in my body in any way. I'm being like constantly pulling it down. So
is it styled this way, or is it knit asymmetrically? I'm curious.
I think it's knit symmetrically, and I think the off the shoulder is the styling, because I saw someone talking about it, and they were planning on wearing it like up on top of the shoulders.
So I would not knit this, and I love that things like this are but I love that they're available, right? Like I love that is something that's on. I also like always love it when some like not safe for work, like jockstrap, I don't know if we can keep that in, shows up on like the hottest patterns. Like I do love seeing things that are like not necessarily the things you'd think of knit up as knitting patterns. So while I appreciate this, I will not be making it.
And this one looks like it's this
lengthened
knitter did it both shoulders and lengthened it. So that is a possibility. Still not my style, personally.
Another question I have for those of you watching, I mean, I think I would consider a short sleeve wool cardigan, but I don't, anything that's going to be above my elbow, no, even like 3/4, but anything that with that much exposed skin, I just think I would want it to be in a plant fiber, and I don't know that would look great in a plant fiber.
Yeah.
That's I think my other issue. Ooh, that was a fun one. Okay, I can't wait to do that for you. I'm going to do that on the next one. Anjali, what's making you happy about knitting?
So, it's behind me. I will reveal it.
I saw it in the notes and I was like, what is this going to be?
It is my Harrisville Designs woolen spun baseball cap. I never wore a baseball cap in my life until moving to Colorado. Like, I mean, I had put it on my head, but it was like, this is not for me. It looks a little weird right now. But,
I think it looks great.
But the sun here is so intense that as soon as I moved here, I was like, oh, shoot, I need more baseball caps. So I've had one that I really love and have been on the lookout for more, just to have more options. And so when I saw this while shopping for some yarn on the Harrisville Designs site, I was like, this is so cute, and I love it because woolen spun. I'm a woolen spun girly, as we know. And it's super comfortable. It's like a cotton twill. And I feel like it fits well. It's not the brim's not too long or too short. And yeah, it's just like the perfect dad cap. So I've been wearing, and the color goes with lots of things too. So I've been wearing it all the time.
I thought you had knit a baseball hat.
No.
And I was like,
no,
I'm sure
drop that stitch. Yeah. Drop that stitch. I'm not.
I remember. I think they had those at Rhinebeck, and I can.
Okay.
Seriously,
no one
has them.
I've never been in public and had anyone comment on it yet, so I am waiting. If you see me out and about wearing this hat, please comment on my hat. I need it. Yeah. How about you, Allison? What's making you happy about knitting?
So we'll put up a picture or a few because I was very proud of it and took a number of pictures. I finally finished a traveler hoodie requested by the 12-year-old who is not my craft-oriented child. My younger one is more into crafts, less so knitting, but like crochet and sewing and weaving, and had gone to some fiber festivals with me. And then I felt bad, and I was like, oh, I should see if my 12-year-old wants to go. So, and she did. And so we went to went to the Frederick Fiber Festival, which is in Frederick, Maryland. I think they do it twice a year. It's not really an ag situation. It's really more of like a retail situation. But it's so manageable. I've really enjoyed it. And she came with me, and I was like, you can pick out some yarn, and then we'll pick a project. She picked a like gradient set from Frogget Yarns. This beautiful yarn. She was like, I want this in a garment. And then I do believe I gave her some choices. I have a knitting friend who has like a system for gift knits where it's like, I will give you a choice of patterns and like a choice of yarns rather than just being like, take whatever you want, right? Because
makes sense.
You want to enjoy knitting it. So I do believe I gave a menu, and she chose the traveler hoodie and then wanted it to be a gradient set, right? So like it gets lighter, but it's not self-gradiating.
It looks amazing.
Thank you. I thought I hated the pattern. I hated doing the gradient. That was the problem. I actually like the pattern a lot. I really like the result. So it was gradient. It was like, it was DK weight. It wasn't worsted, but it definitely wasn't on gauge. Like it was like all these factors. And I think we got the yarn over a year ago, or about a year ago. And I was like, I need to finish this before it gets too hot for her to wear. I do think it will last her. She's kind of a grown up now. And so like, I don't know that she'll grow out of it. Like she might be able to keep it for a long time. And I didn't actually block it. So, and it's super wash, and it like fit when she put it on. I was like, I'm not even going to block it. It like looks fine. Like not going to bother. We've talked about this too, about like, I don't like knitting this. Why don't I like knitting this? It's like the yarn is great. The pattern's great. It's like the combination therein. And it really was the like, I'm doing the gradient here and then doing it. So it's bottom up, and you split for the front and back. And then I had to do the gradient the same way on both sides. And the way that the pattern is done and the way I was doing, I ended up with all these ends and then doing the arms again. Oh, and I was also playing a little bit of yarn chicken with a gradient. That was a whole thing. And then I didn't even bother to grade from the collar up to because she's usually wearing the hood down, so you don't really see this part. You can see in the photo when you put it up, it's like more of a jump in color. But yeah, there were like so many, and there were like all these like fiddly, it's again, these like fiddly little touches, like the hood, like the casement for the eye cord. I was like hating every minute of it. And then the final product is so good that you're like, oh no, I do want to make that again. Which is a pattern type I find where it's like, I don't necessarily enjoy the process of this.
But the finish.
But also now that I've done it once, I might enjoy the process more because I know where it's going.
Especially if it wasn't a gradient.
And if it,
You'd
and
be
if
like,
it
this
was,
is so easy.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like, and I think I've seen examples of this, but it would be a really fun like hand spun sweater to do.
Yeah,
I
I've
think.
seen a really nice hand spun example.
So A pluses all around for pattern and yarn and final product, and everything was just getting there. It was a bit of a slog.
Yes.
Do you have like a gift strategy when it comes to knitting gifts in terms of like if
Yeah, I just ask like what type. I had them send me a picture of what it is they have in their mind of like what they want. This is what I did for my sister and actually the friend who wants the Uma scarf. And then from there so my sister for her vest sent me like a just cabled vest, ready to wear item. And then I just found some examples that like were like textured and about the same shape, and then had her choose and made sure that it was something that I just glanced through to at least know that I would want to make that thing. And what, Alison, are you yelling about other than knitting?
So, not next week, but the following week, like a month ago, I got an impromptu text from my daughter, again, 12-year-old, making a big appearance in this episode, from her best friend's mom proposing that they come for a visit, which is a big deal because this best friend lives in South Korea. The mom had happened to find cheap plane tickets and was like, could we come like the first week in May? What do you think? So she's lovely. Her daughter is lovely. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before. I took my daughter to South Korea a couple years ago to visit them, which was like such an incredible experience. And there's no way I could possibly repay it to them. They speak English and they lived here for a year. It's like I can't like take them around the way that they did with us. But I will do my best to do everything I can. I'm actually knitting the mom some socks right now.
Oh, nice.
As like a
With
little
ruffles?
present. No, which maybe, I don't know. I feel like it's a personal choice. So it's it's like fun colors, but like a little more like straightforward. The oxbow socks, which I like a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Which I've knit one pair of already. So trying my best to make it as exciting a trip for them as it was when we went to South Korea. But I really love my daughter's friendship with this friend. And whenever I want to yell about the internet, I do remember that it is also the reason that she can still have such an easy friendship with this person.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to that visit. How about you?
So I recently got my Denver bingo card further stamped and started taking a
hat, baseball cap about knitting. Yeah.
And now I'm bouldering. So I have a friend where we sometimes will take up new hobbies together. We've done a lot of like roller skating classes together. And I had visited this bouldering gym called Movement. It's across the country, so could possibly
my
be one
children
near
go
you.
to Movement here.
Oh, nice.
Just to be bouldering is like rock climbing without you're doing it
Yes.
at a height that is safe to do without a rope.
Yes. And then at the gyms have like padded floors. And so my younger son went to a birthday party at this gym. And so when I went to pick him up, I was like, oh, this is awesome. There's just like it seems like a really inclusive space, like all different types of people there. And it just looked fun. And just to see these little kids like scrambling up these boulders just kind of felt like, yeah, I would like to try this. So my friend and I signed up for a class, and it's just the two of us in this class. And so we've only had one so far, but I just loved it. Like I just really liked how it's not only kind of like physical challenge, but also like mental, where I am someone that really loves
Strategic.
puzzles.
Mhm.
And it's definitely like also a puzzle that you have to solve with your body, which is interesting and not something that you do all the time. And the teacher for our first class was a woman. And so I felt like she also had good tips for like how like bodies can move differently through space and sort of like how to use our bodies to help us get up the wall or whatever, the boulder that we're climbing. So I really enjoyed it.
Bouldering is very hard,
We were just doing like V0 or V1, like the
but
first.
just holding up your own body with your hands. So actually, I'm trying to think if I've actually bouldered. I don't know if I've bouldered.
But your feet too. Are you using?
Well,
your feet?
yes. Which, right, if you're doing it right.
Yeah. Allison's just hanging on. I don't like this.
Well, so I actually don't think I've bouldered, but so my kids do classes there and they really like it. They've both really latched onto rock climbing in a way that's great because I think it, like the body awareness piece of it, the strength building, the challenge of like not always getting it right. Like there's so many good things about it. But the first, I don't know if like I was trying to convince them to go, for whatever reason, I agreed to also do it. So their instructor does bouldering with them, but also like traditional, it's not, I'm going to call it the wrong thing. Not rope climbing and not
Just like climbing with ropes.
But yeah, there's like a term for it. We'll
I
put
don't
it
know.
down. I'll look it up and then we'll put it at the bottom. But I agreed to do that. I am scared of heights. I got like halfway up and I was like, because I think I also had never done it before and didn't realize that you don't necessarily feel the rope. Right? Like as you're going up, it's like the whole point is for you to learn to use your own body. You're not being pulled up by the person at the bottom. But so it doesn't feel like you're being held in necessarily. And that panicked me. We did go to a slightly shorter wall and I was like, I need to get up this thing, get to the top so that I can never do this again, which I did. But I take my kids. Yeah. Maybe our first sponsorship will come from Movement.
Contact us.
Yeah, we're here. Like
you don't have to have a certain type of body to do it. It's non-competitive for the most part. All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we have one more episode in this season coming up, which we need to figure out what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. May have a bonus. We're not sure yet.
True. But yeah, we're very curious to hear your thoughts on test knitting. What are you seeing out? What discussions are you seeing out in the world? What do you think of said discussions? What is your own experience from any perspective of the test knitting process? We'd love to hear.
What would your ideal test knit situation look like, whether you're a designer or a knitter?
I feel like we hear the horror stories a lot. We welcome those. Curious about the other end of the spectrum, the incredible experience you had that changed you as a knitter or person. Share them all.
So comment, like, subscribe, and possibly hype if you can figure out how to do that.
Always the hype. All right. See you in a few weeks.
Bye.
Yay.